How's everybody doing this morning? Doing well? Hey, it's good to be back. And it made a lot of sense. Brian told me, hey, we're doing a series called The Best a Man Can Be. So naturally, he called me, right? That's where it is. So I'll talk about this a little bit later in the service as well. But I am the campus pastor at, sorry to say this, the best Crosspoint campus. Online, you guys can be sitting in your living room with your pants off right now, so that might be the best campus. So the better campus. We'll just go with better campus. No, it's so exciting to be back here. My wife and I, we spent 5 years here in Orange County with all of you guys, and I'm just so excited to be back. But I also just want to jump right into this and get right to the Bible here for a second. So I want you guys to picture this with me. It's the Valley of Elah. On one side, you've got the Israelites. On the other side, you have the Philistines. They are mortal enemies. They have grown up learning to hate each other. Every single day, the Philistine giant, Goliath, possibly one of the greatest war machines to ever be born, is walking to the middle of the valley and issuing a challenge to the other side, saying, send out your best warrior. Send out the best of the best. We're going to go one-on-one, winner take all. The loser, your entire nation, will become slaves to the winner. And day after day, nobody takes the challenge. Israel sits in silence. Until one day, a boy possibly of the age of 15 goes to the king and says, let me fight. And somehow, for some reason beyond even what I would comprehend, the king agrees. And this young boy goes out to the battlefield armed with nothing but a sling and some stones. Okay, this is a scenario that I believe that men and boys of all ages, they still dream about. Okay, what happens, they don't necessarily dream in the terms of David versus Goliath. And this is a term that we all know, right? David and Goliath. Even if you have no church background, even if you don't know the Bible, you probably still know the term David versus Goliath. It is so firmly part of our culture and our society that we think in some of these terms. And I believe that one of the reasons why this story from the Bible resonates, even with people that don't even call Jesus their Lord, is because men and boys still dream about this scenario. We don't necessarily put the same words, we don't necessarily dream of fighting the giants, but we still dream of this type of thing. But here's how it looks for boys. They go around the house pretending they're superheroes. They watch the Avengers movies and they say, I'm Iron Man, or I'm Captain America, or I'm the Incredible Hulk. For my dad's generation, he grew up loving Westerns. And just the idea of pretending he's Roy Rogers as he puts on the cowboy hat and running around with his cap gun, which just captivated his attention. For me, it was Star Wars. Or possibly this, I would run around my house and pretend to be Indiana Jones, always trying to escape the rolling rock on its way to get me. By the time I reached 9 or 10 years old, I fell in love with the movie Die Hard. Which I know what you're thinking, oh my gosh, as a 9 or 10-year-old kid, you got to watch Die Hard? Well, no, see, my dad was a pastor, so he definitely didn't let me watch the unedited version. But I recorded on my VCR the TV version of Die Hard, which is a very dated statement to say these days. And I'm telling you, I had the whole 45 minutes memorized. It was so good. Because it was edited, so it had to be, they took a lot out. By the time I reached high school, I was captivated with Lord of the Rings. And I'm sure that for the boys and the men in this room, if you were to think back on just the stories and the adventures that captivated you from your childhood, you would say, it might have been a different story, it might have been different characters, but there were similar themes. There's similar ideas. The idea that there is a part of me that longs for adventure. I long to be in a situation that just makes my heart beat a little bit fast. I want to be the hero. I want to be the warrior. I want to go out and experience something that just makes me a little nervous. And I believe That this spirit of adventure, it does not die out when you reach adulthood, but our dreams, the way that we play this out in our fantasies, it might change. So today what happens is that men, they dream of reorganizing the supply structure at their business and then going back at the quarterly meeting and checking the P&L and seeing that they increased profitability by 15%. Nobody said it could be done, but they did it. Like, that's the type of stuff they dream of. Or, I don't know, you dads out there, you probably dream of some adventures too. Like, you dream of going to Macy's and buying a brand new pair of white New Balances, I guess. Like, I don't know, you guys get excited about these things, right? Like, men, you dream of defeating giants. But see, the problem is the vast majority of men today, they're going into the wrong battles with the wrong weapons and with the wrong training. See, here's one of the big problems today. Like, as you look at the landscape of manhood in the 21st century American ethos, is that men, by and large, are bored. They are bored out of their mind. That spirit of adventure that just wants to come bursting forth out of them, it's been replaced by a reality that reeks of predictability and playing it safe. It's like an itch that you just long to scratch, and no matter how hard you try, you never seem to find it, because the battles, the weapons, the tools that you choose to use, you've replaced them with just quick thrills, right? Now, you would expect, and maybe in a church service like this, for me to rail against things like uncontrolled gambling, or the mystique of an extramarital affair, or quite possibly just the fantasy world of pornography. And on one level, you would be right. Like, I would say that those are dangerous and things that will take you further than you want to go. And these can be simply the tools, the weapons, and the training that most men use to try and live out that spirit of adventure that wants to come bursting out inside of them. But I'd say that this creeps itself into a lot of other ways as well. There's other ways that this manifests itself in manhood, and we don't even realize it. See, this is one of the reasons why a guy in his mid-50s will overnight go $80,000 into debt for a depreciating asset. But he does this because, hey, it looks cool and it goes 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, right? Like, what is that? That's the spirit of adventure, just trying to burst out. This is one of the reasons why 140 million Americans have Netflix accounts. We like to be entertained, but for a lot of people, it's because I'm looking for adventure, and this is the easiest way to do it. It's one of the reasons why role-playing video games is a multi-billion-dollar industry. This isn't just something for 12-year-olds anymore. Men and boys alike. We love the idea of getting to play out what would it look like if I had the strength of Superman, the moves of James Bond, and the accuracy of a Navy SEAL. What would it look like if I had that kind of power? Now, are some of these things the problem? No, not necessarily. They're not necessarily the problem. The problem occurs when this longing for adventure is only ever met with artificial ploys for excitement. And from the church perspective, like, what have we done as the church to give men the ability to reach out and take adventure? See, if I were to say, do you associate the words Christianity with masculinity and adventure? You'd be like, yeah, no, not at all, right? Like, this is what most people think when we talk about Christianity. For a lot of people, following Jesus is anything but an adventure. It's something that you do to appease your wife. It's something that you do where you show up on a Sunday and you sing about your feelings. You're told to be loving and good. And your kid brings home like this coloring book picture of like Jesus coddling a lamb. And the only thing like adventurous or exciting about Sunday mornings is like avoiding the bucket when it's passed by you. You know, it's like, whoa, just don't touch it to make sure that, you don't have to give anything. So to a lot of men, the church is completely unhelpful for scratching that itch for adventure in our life. And when this happens, I believe it puts most men in this unhealthy tension. And see, and this is why we're in the middle of a 4-week series about manhood that we're calling The Best a Man Can Be. And this concept is built around the idea that in a perfect environment, in like a healthy environment, boys and men would naturally go through a 6-sequence progression. Going through these 6 sequences would help them be fully initiated into manhood, fully prepared to contribute to society, to provide for a wife, to care for their children. And like I said, in a perfect or healthy environment, these things would just happen naturally. They would just happen. It would look a lot like how a 13 or 14-year-old boy suddenly has to start shaving. Like he doesn't tell his face, like start sprouting hairs. It just does it naturally. And in a perfect and healthy environment, walking through these stages would happen automatically. But kind of like bricks being stacked on top of each other. That if you bypass one of the stages, or if you're wounded in one, it will send ramifications through the rest of the structure. And so last week we talked about the first stage of finding authentic manhood, and that is the stage of the beloved son, which starts about birth and ends about the time a boy is 12 or 13. And today we are talking about the stage of the adventurer. And for most boys and men, it starts about the age of 13 or 14 and will last until their mid-20s. And even those who are older than that, you'll find yourself returning to that stage later on as you try and grab a hold of that spirit of adventure. And the reason why it's there, the reason why you long to do something that makes your heart beat fast is because God has put it in your wiring. He has put it in your DNA. And if you'd like to read more about this in a little bit more detail, we highly recommend the book, The Way of the Wild of Heart by John Eldredge. I think you can find it in the Home Point bookstore. But today, like I said, we want to talk about the adventurer stage. And the reason why is because I believe that manhood is in crisis today. And it's evidenced by the fact that we don't even have a good goal or definition for what manhood even looks like. And here's how I know this. Here's how I know this is true. The word masculinity has as much of a positive connotation as it does a negative one in our society. What we've done is we've taken a lot of the ideas of masculinity and manhood, but we've abused them. They're distorted. They don't look like they're supposed to. In fact, we watched this commercial last week, and I felt like it was worth returning. And just to give you a little bit of context, during the Super Bowl this last year, the shaving cream company Gillette aired this commercial asking the question, as we look at the landscape of manhood and masculinity in the United States today, is this the best a man can be? I want you to watch this.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it?
It's likely happening here in bullying, a problem.
We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says the problem is toxic masculinity.
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men, we're acting like we're going to shake
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
I mean, this should give us pause, right? Like, when Gillette, the shaving cream company, is saying, whoa, hey, when we look at society right now, are we getting this right? Like, when the shaving cream companies are the ones who are like having to tell the rest of the world, like, hey, something might be up here. I think we should stop, and we should say, maybe they have a point. See, here's the problem, is that, this is biology. Men are naturally physically larger and stronger than women. And that rather than using that size and that strength to protect and care, what we've done is we've weaponized it. See, in our society, men largely will still hold a lot of the positions of authority and power, and rather than using these positions to protect women and to care for them, we've used that authority to manipulate, take, and demand from people that are under us. And do you know how I know this is true? See, when my wife takes my daughters to the park, she takes note of every single man who walks into her space. I don't know a single woman who walks through a parking lot dark at night or an alleyway in the city without like carrying their keys in between their fingers or like having their mace like close at hand. And why are they doing this? Because they're nervous. They're scared of what other largely men will do. There's entire industries that are devoted to the protection and the self-defense of women. I sat, when the Me Too movement like hit, like when people were sharing their stories online, I remember sitting on my couch and sitting at my desk and reading the stories of people who were close personal friends of mine. Like women and girls and ladies that I respect and I love as they recounted, unbeknownst to me, some of the atrocities that they experience at the hands of other people. Guys, this is an epidemic. And this is endemic of men who are still acting like boys, carrying those tendencies into adulthood. Did you know 90% of rape victims are women? This next stat, it blew me away. 1 out of 5. Okay, not 1 out of 20, not 1 out of 100. 1 out of 5 women will suffer rape or attempted rape in their lifetime. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. We need to call on boys to grow up, to become men. And so how does a man become the best that he can be? How do you, as a man, go into battle with the giants in your life? See, I think we all know the headlines of David and Goliath, but not a whole lot of us have maybe stopped to actually contemplate the details and like read the actual article that makes up the story of how this little teenage boy goes to battle with the greatest war machine that Philistia had ever developed. See, I believe that the reason why David was able to take down Goliath on that day, the reason why he was able to prevail with just a sling and 5 stones is because of the adventurer stage that he walked through in the years prior to the Valley of Elah. So if you brought your Bible, I'm going to ask you right now to open it up. If you go right to the middle and start going to the left, you're going to hit a book called 1 Samuel. And we want to go to 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're also going to have it on the screens for you to follow along as well. But I want us to actually stop and pause and say, how does a man become the best that he can be? Well, a lot of times it starts in the wilderness. So here's what it says in 1 Samuel 17, verses 14 and 15. It says, David was the youngest son. David's 3 oldest brothers stayed with Saul's army, but David went back and forth so he could help his father with the sheep in Bethlehem. So just to kind of set the stage for a second, while Saul, who is the king of all of Israel, is in the Valley of Elah being stared down by Goliath on a daily basis, David, the youngest son, has 3 older brothers who are there on the battlefield. And David is there some of the time, but he's also at home some of the time. And what is he doing in between? Well, when he's at home, he's helping his dad take care of the sheep. And when he's there, he's providing care packages to his brothers. And see, I believe that for a boy to really experience the adventurer stage and get the most out of it, there are 4 key ingredients that he needs to really grab a hold of. And I want to walk through these quick, and I want to expound on them as we go. But here we go. These are the 4 key ingredients of the adventurer stage. The first is adventure itself. Boys need to experience adventure. The second is they need a guide or mentor to help interpret what they're experiencing. The third is they need discipline and hard work. And then the last key ingredient is confidence and validation. And so going back to the story of David for a second. I believe the reason he could beat Goliath is because of the adventure stage he walked through. And as a younger boy, he would find himself in the wilderness, just him and the sheep. Nobody there to tell him exactly what to do. Nobody there to like look over his shoulder. Just him experiencing life out on the plains, out on the range, taking care of the sheep. And when he's not there, he's traveling to a battlefield. Home is in the wilderness, just him and the sheep. And see, I think that boys long for that kind of freedom. They long for that kind of adventure. See, nobody had to teach me as a young boy to just take that wood on the side of the house and like assemble it into a bike ramp, right? Like nobody had to tell me that because it was just kind of ingrained inside of me. Or nobody had to tell me to like, hey, it's really fun and cool is to crawl through the storm drains at the park. Like I just naturally was like looking for these types of things. And I believe that boys are still looking for that type of adventure. As men, we have the desire to put ourselves in those situations to make our heartbeats fast, to give us just a little bit of a thrill. The tastes and the types of adventure that most men will try and do today, it changes from person to person. For one person, it's the thrill of competition through sports. For others, it's that risk of business. For others, it's winning the heart of a woman. For other people, it's extreme sports. And quite possibly for you, it might just be being out in nature, being in the mountains or on the ocean, and just not knowing exactly, is everything going to work out okay? But a word of warning, though, especially to those of you who are raising those young adventurers in your home. Although you don't want to put your children in danger, it's never really adventure if there's not independence involved. If there's no independence, then there's no fear, and therefore there's no adventure. So stay away, those of you who are raising young adventurers in your home, from trying to strangle all of the excitement and all the adventure out of your kid's life. Give them some independence. Give them some freedom. Make it age appropriate. Obviously, watch them. But moms and dads, allow those little adventurers in your life just to experience a little bit of that taste and that thrill of their heart beating fast. The second ingredient that is essential to this adventure stage is having that guide or that mentor help you. Every boy needs that mentor to help interpret and give definition to the experiences that they have. For David, I'm fairly confident that guide in his life was his dad. See, it says right here in that verse that he was helping his dad with the sheep. He wasn't working for his dad. Furthermore, what is David doing when he travels to the battlefield? Well, he's bringing these care packages to his brothers. There is strong indication that David's dad was involved, David's dad was loving, David's dad was part of his life. And so moms and dads, let me ask you this question. What do you do when your sophomore-age son makes varsity? What do you do? How do you help him interpret that success in his life? How do you encourage him to keep his feet on the ground and not act like he's superior to everybody else? Every boy needs a mentor. What do you do when your son is fired from his first job? How do you help him process through the emotions of failure without thinking that he is in fact a failure? How do you interpret these emotions and these feelings? Every boy needs somebody who will help guide him through the adventures that he goes on, to give some definition and some clarity to what he is experiencing. And I know that this is true because it pops up in our literature. So as you read through a book like Lord of the Rings, it's Gandalf to Frodo. It's Merlin to King Arthur. It's Mufasa to Simba. It's somebody in this boy's life to help just give some clarity and some definition to the things that he is experiencing. Now, the third ingredient that is essential for this adventure stage is discipline and hard work. One of the truly great secrets to David's success as a warrior and later as a king is that he learned early in his life in the pasture lands discipline and hard work. See, when you're in the frontier space, you're constantly in danger of your flock being raided. Like at any point, somebody could sneak in and steal some of your sheep. A wild animal could come and take some of your flock. And so you have to be diligent. You always have to be looking out. A negligent shepherd is a failed shepherd. For David to be good at what he did, he had to be instilled with discipline and hard work. See, truly great adventure, it requires strength that is channeled through discipline and hard work. It's the sharpening of your skills in an environment that allows you to grow personally. For me, I think personally at a level that the year of 2002 was that year where discipline and hard work finally started to make a lot of sense to me. I started off that year and I looked in the mirror and I saw myself and I said, "Ugh, I do not like this." I was overweight, I was pudgy. It was not a good look. It just wasn't. And you could tell because I didn't go on dates, right? Like that's just how it was. And so I said to myself, like, I need to make a change. And so is the discipline and the hard work of going on a diet and exercising. Then I wanted some independence and some freedom. And so I went to my parents and said, I'd love a car. And they said, well, we can give you this amount of money. I said, well, that's not enough. I can't get a good car with that. And they said, well, get a job. And so I got a job. And I had to learn to be there on time, and I had to learn to give my best. And by the time I reached the end of the year of 2002, discipline and hard work, it wasn't just something that I heard about. It was something that was part of me. And I think that every boy and every man needs to go through an adventure that helps instill discipline and hard work. And see, the last ingredient, when all these things come together, when you have adventure, when you have a mentor, and when you have discipline and hard work, it leads to the last key ingredient. And that's one of confidence and validation. Now, why did David believe he could beat the giant? Why did he do it? Why did he believe he could do it? Okay, I know the correct answer because we're at church, right? Like, I know the correct answer is, well, yeah, he had faith and confidence that God was going to give him the victory. Okay, like, I know that that's like the right answer, but that's not the answer he gives, okay? When push comes to shove and the king says to him, why am I going to let you, fight this battle? He doesn't give that answer. Here's the answer he gives in verse 34 of 1 Samuel 17. It says, but David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it, and I struck it, and I delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. He knew he could beat this giant because homeboy was already grabbing lions by the beard. Guys, I know this is the Bible, and so some of us are like, yeah, I just accept for what it says. But think about that for a second. He was grabbing lions by the beard. I've been around long enough to know a couple things, okay? Here's the first thing. You have got to be pretty confident in yourself to grab a lion by the beard, okay? And just the fact that David didn't write 100 Psalms all about that, because if I was him, I would start every conversation with, hey, you know what this hand does? It grabs lions by the beard. The fact that there's not 100 Psalms, all talking about this alone, lets me know it was so routine for him, he didn't think much of it. That's pretty confident. This guy he's seen some things. The second is this. Nobody comes out of the womb ready to fight lions and bears. It doesn't happen. I believe this with all my heart. This is outside of the Bible, but I believe this is true. For every time he went and chased down a lion or a bear and actually got the lamb back, he probably lost one or two in the process. That the first time the bear and the lion showed up amongst his flock, I doubt as a 12-year-old, he's like, all right, I got this. I bet he was terrified out of his mind. And as he went back to his dad, said, I know I left with 40, but I'm coming back with 38. I believe that his dad helped him process this, walked him through his failure, and said, you know what? We'll get back out there. We'll do it again. And the next time we'll be ready. And the next time probably came and, hey, maybe he took a swing at it and maybe it started charging him and he just bolted the opposite direction. I don't know. But he went back to his dad and said, I know I went out with 38, but I've come back with 36. It's all right, David. We're going to look at this and we're going to try it again the next time. And over time, he became a bear and a lion killer. He was very confident. He felt validated in who he was. And here's a really interesting part of the story that sometimes just kind of gets glossed over as we retell the story of David and Goliath. So when David goes to the king, this guy named Saul, and says, I will fight the giant. Saul says to him, if you're going to go to battle with this giant, here's what you need. You need some armor. You need something to protect yourself. And so David looks at it and he tries it on, in fact, and he realizes really quick, if I put on this armor, it restricts the use of my arm. I also realize as I wear the armor on my legs and on my body, That if I'm going to beat this giant, the one thing I've got going for me is I'm quick. This guy is big, but I can be quick. And suddenly, with this armor, he doesn't have the range of his arm. He doesn't have any quickness. And so he says, I can't wear this. And I believe 99% of anybody who would listen to this conversation would have said, David, you need to wear the armor. You need to put this on. But David was so confident in his abilities. He was so sure of himself that he said, I don't need this. I don't need this. And I wonder, how many men that are sitting here in this room today, you're wearing somebody else's armor simply because you never gained the confidence to go into battle with your own strengths. Your strengths have been neutralized. You think that you're worthless and you think that you're a failure. You feel this angst of never being good enough. And all because somebody else who doesn't know you and has never walked in your shoes has told you, if you want to be the best you can be, you need to be like this. And so without any validation or with any confidence, you didn't have anybody helping guide you through a stage of adventure and discipline and hard work in your life. You said, okay, I'll put this on. And you put it on and it has neutralized every strength in your being. I personally feel like I've been walking through my own David and Goliath story over the last year. As we mentioned before, Crosspoint is one church in two different locations. And a year ago, I and my family moved up to Ventura. And like we knew what we were getting into when we left. We knew that in the previous couple years before we had arrived, that this church had gone through the ringer. There had been fighting. There had been a split. They were upside down significantly financially. The reputation because of these things wasn't necessarily the greatest. And actually, I went to lunch with a local pastor just a couple weeks after I'd been up there. And as we're sitting outside on the patio, all these people that are part of his church would come up and he would introduce me to them. And he'd be like, yeah, this is Matt. He's pastor of the church right around the corner. And almost one by one, they would look at me and go, oh, hey, we're praying for you. And I just remember like, what have I gotten myself into? Like when people are not part of the church or are like, giving me the whole like pat on the back and like, you'll make it, son. Like, I thought maybe this giant's a little bit bigger than I thought. There's been a lot of the last year that's been really hard. Just like being like completely transparent and honest. Like there's been a lot of this last year that's been really difficult. There's a resiliency that you have to have when you're trying to change a culture and it's trying to spring back just like a rubber band, like going back to its original size. There's a fortitude that you have to possess to make a really hard decision or financial decision and like stick by it, even though you know that people do not like you because of it. And I can confidently say that had I walked through this 10 years ago, I would have been sunk. Like it would have been way too much for me. The battle would have been too hard. The giant would have been too big. The stories would be too scary. I would, first of all, would probably never actually sit up and say, yeah, let me do this. But because as a young 22 and 23-year-old staff member at another church, and because of the 5 years I spent here walking through battles and going into adventures, and having the key mentors in my life helping interpret and give clarity and definition to what I've experienced, I can confidently say that God has given me the strength to get through this last year. And I believe because of that, He's going to give me the strength to keep going. It's going to happen. Now, it's not all been hard. I actually have some exciting things to share with you. Over the last 3 months, just the last 3 months alone, our church has grown by 20% up in Ventura. God is, let's give it up for God on that one. God is on the move. People are making decisions to follow Jesus. Young families are coming all the time. And I believe that we are just getting started, that God is just on the brink of doing something incredible, both here in Orange County and in Ventura County. But here's something that is just so important to understand. And this goes to you. For those of you who are boys and men who want to slay giants in your own life, that you fantasize about what it would be like to be the hero or the warrior in your story. The battle with Goliath, it starts and it's won in the wilderness with the bear and the lion. You don't just arrive in the valley of Elah ready to fight the giant. No. It starts in the wilderness with the bear and the lion. It's the process that God takes you on to develop you into the person that he wants you to be. I want to add a new word to your vocabulary today. The word is meekness. Now, I think most people don't aspire to be meek. In fact, we don't even really like the word meek because it sounds a lot like weak, and therefore we don't really want to be that. I mean, nobody puts it on their online dating profile. I'm tall, I'm dark, and I'm meek. Like, nobody does that. And in large part because we don't know how to define it. In fact, this is what 1 Corinthians 10:1 says. It says, "Now I, Paul, myself, am pleading with you by the meekness and the gentleness of who? Of Christ, who in presence am lowly among you, but being absent and bold towards you." And let me tell you, Jesus was anything but weak. The only thing weak about him is that's how long it took for him to make everything in the universe, okay? That's the only thing weak about him. See, we love talking about horsepower in our cars, but you know one of the most incredible things about a horse is? It can go from 35 miles an hour to a dead stop with just a word. What is that? That's meekness. Here's the definition of meekness. It's power, but under control. And Jesus exemplified meekness. He has power, but it's under control. Jesus went through his own adventurer stage. As a young man, he learned the trade of carpentry. Not an easy task. It takes discipline, it takes hard work. He was comfortable in the wilderness. He was so strong and he was so confident. At one point in his life, he spent 40 days in the wilderness, no food, no water, being tempted by Satan. I can tell you right now, if I skip lunch, just lunch, I can be tempted by Mr. Rogers and I'm giving in. That's just how it works. But Jesus is out there, strong, confident, powerful, but under control. Who is the best a man can be? Simply put, it is Jesus. Jesus is the best that you can be. He is confident, he is respectable, he is in control, he is meek, he is a provider and a protector. But last time I checked, nobody in this room is Jesus. And these attributes, they are not innate, they are built. They are built in the wilderness, fighting the lion and the bear. What is the vision you have for your life? What is the vision you have for your sons? What happens if you missed out on this stage? And right now, this is creating more of a frustration in you than it even is hope and joy, because you're like, well, I missed it. I'm in my 40s and I never had adventure. Nobody has helped guide me. Nobody has mentored me. I feel like I'm starting with a deficit that I'm already losing. I believe there's still hope for you. This will be a constant theme, and I know it sounds like a Jesus juke, but this is true. God wants to be that father in your life. He wants to be that mentor in your life. He wants to take you on an adventure, and he wants to help bring some definition and some clarity to your experience. But here is the cost of not following through. Here's what happens when we don't fully initiate boys into manhood. We become caricatures of who God has designed us to be. You've ever been to Disneyland or the fair and they draw a caricature of you? It looks like you, but everything's embellished. Everything looks just a little bit different. Well, that's what most men are. They're a caricature of who God has designed them to be. They're not confident, they're arrogant. They don't win the heart of a woman. They seduce and they destroy. They only adventure, but they don't ever develop hard work or discipline, and they become like this adult version of Peter Pan where they just never grow up. Or they only have discipline and hard work, but they don't have any adventure or fun in their life, and eventually they reach this point in their mid-40s where they have this breakdown and have a midlife crisis. So how do you heal this wound in your life? I believe it starts when we step out. I believe it steps when we step out into adventure. It might just be something as spiritual for you as stepping out into nature and doing something that's outside of your comfort zone. It might be stepping out and starting that career that you know God has designed you for. It might be stepping out and finally going to counseling with your wife or going to Marriage Point. It might just be stepping out and volunteering, which is no weak thing to do. It might be stepping out and going on a missions trip. You want to get into a situation that makes your heart beat fast, that's a little bit scary, and gives you just that thrill of adventure. Go on a missions trip. It will change your life. It's cool to dream about skydiving, but unless you never actually step out of the plane, it's just a fantasy. You're going to need a guide. You're going to need a mentor. So you need to join a growth group. Men, I've got great news for you. Today in the lobby, there's a booth that's going to be right by the door where you can sign up to be part of one of our men's growth groups that are just starting up right now. You want to get around these guys because they're going to help guide and mentor. If that's not really your taste, find another man who's just maybe one step ahead in life and say, let's go out to coffee. Let's just grab some lunch. Maybe it's the courage to call up your dad, say, hey, let's have some conversations. See, I believe that God has a great vision for you and your life, and it's nothing short of adventurous. That God has something that is so full of life and so full of excitement that he is ready to put you on. But most of us, we're too scared. Instead of stepping out, we sit down. We say, well, maybe this will just get figured out on its own. It's not going to get figured out on its own. You're going to have to take a step. So here's what I'd like to do right now. Printed in your program as well as on the screen, we have a prayer that I would like us to read together. Whether you feel so grateful as you hear this, you're like, hey, I really think that God has allowed me to be blessed with the people in my life and the adventure as a young boy to instill these things in my life. Or whether you have a wound right now that you feel like you need to fix. I just want to invite you to read this along with me, not out loud, but just silently. But let this be your prayer. Father, take me there. Take me back to the things that were lost or unfinished or never even started. Take me into the adventurer stage and do this work in my soul. Father me here. Give me eyes to see both where you have been fathering me and I didn't know it, and where you're initiating me now, though I might be misinterpreting it. I want to be brave and true. I want a strength and I want to offer it to others. Lead me on and help me to offer this to my sons and to the men you have brought into my life. Give me eyes to see what they need and creativity into offering just that. Show me how to help them in their journeys, even though mine is still very much underway. Amen.